Good morning. 早上好. Can't miss an opportunity to speak Chinese. Thank you. I can't tell you how happy and honored I feel today to be introducing our honoree, Dr. Murisiku Raiku. Look at that photo. That is the photo I snapped with my cheap camera, I should say, the day he arrived in Minnesota, August 29, 1991, exactly 25 years ago today, or this year. He arrived the very afternoon of our annual International Students Welcome Picnic. He was half an hour late, having just traveled all the way from Ghana to New York Kennedy Airport, and then 48 hours on the Greyhound bus to Minneapolis, surviving only on Coca-Cola, because that was the only thing that he knew was kosher to eat or drink as a Muslim. You all know how excited I am all the time, every year when our new international students come. But you know what? I was more excited than ever that year to meet this young man because of the unusual way he came to Breck. 3 months earlier, our admissions office received a handwritten letter from 15-year-old Murisiku Raiku from Ghana. It was a plea for us to give him an education because, as one of the youngest of 7 siblings, he had observed how limited their lives had become because they could not have further education. We in the admissions office were so impressed with the initiative and determination of this young man that without further documentation, not even a photo, if we had a photo, we probably wouldn't, but Breck admitted him. When asked how he learned of Breck, he told the story how he would go and help his mother in the market. And while in town, he would often visit the library. And one day, he happened upon a copy of Peterson's Guide to Independent Secondary Schools. He proceeded to copy down 30 names and addresses of these schools and proceeded to handwrite a letter to each of these schools, asking them to give him an opportunity to learn. He heard back from 4 of these 30 schools, but chose Breck because he knew he would live with an American family and learn about American culture. He obviously didn't know anything about our climate. Within a few weeks, the upper school director recognized his exceptional ability and felt that he belonged with the junior class. Within 2 years, nurtured by this wonderful Breck community of teachers, host families, classmates, he was fully ready for college, admitted to Amherst College in Massachusetts. Here's a photo of Muri coming back for Thanksgiving his freshman year, looking totally transformed by the East Coast. Years of hard work and achievement can be summarized all too easily. He was, of course, a success at Amherst College. And then 4 years later, he graduated at the top of his class from the University of Minnesota Medical School, followed by 7-year residency in neurosurgery at UCLA. But even after becoming a board-certified neurosurgeon, Muri wasn't finished with his education. Because of his interest in healthcare policies, he went back to the Kennedy School at Harvard for his master's in public administration. He now serves as director of neurosurgery at the California Hospital Medical Center in downtown Los Angeles, as well as an attending neurosurgeon at ProMed Spine in Beverly Hills. And in his spare time, he involves himself in innovative technology in the field for the third world and in charitable organizations centered on awareness and service, such as Brotherhood Sister Soul, which sends underprivileged young Americans to Ghana, and the Africa Unite for Haiti project, which strengthened ties within the African diaspora. But we all know that Dr. Raiku has more surprises for all of us. I asked him once, when he was still in college, what he was going to do after he finishes his education. He said to me he would go back to Ghana to build schools because he had seen how important education was to his life. But now, he has redirected his focus onto an even more ambitious goal: to help to build an effective 21st century healthcare delivery system to serve the people of Africa. As a first concrete step, he has recently designed a mobile healthcare app that will be launched in Africa later this year. His hope that it will be transformative for healthcare in all of Africa. After hearing all this, you can now understand why the Breck Alumni Association chose Dr. Murisiku Raiku to be the 2016 Alumni of the Year. As his advisor while at Breck, I, along with his host families, most of whom are here today, we want you, Muri, to know how proud and happy we are for all of your great achievements, which we know were attained through sheer determination, inspiration, sacrifices, and lots of hard work. Without further ado, I give you Dr. Murisiku Raiku of Ghana and America.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't know she still had that picture. I would have found a way to make sure it wasn't shown. But that's actually a great picture because it always takes me back to the beginning. And it's important to always remember the beginning. Before I start, say something about my experience at Breck, let me go back and go over some of what Mrs. Wong has already mentioned. And that is how it all began. So it's basically a 15-year-old kid in perhaps one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city of Kumasi in Ghana, who didn't really see a lot of people going beyond high school if they even finished high school in my neighborhood. 6 of 7 children from my mother was for all intents and purposes by herself, taking care of us. So we did our best as kids to try and help her as well when we had a chance. So I'll spend time in the marketplace where she sold goods, made some profit to put some food on the table. And right next to that was the zoo, and next to the zoo was the library that was sponsored by the American Embassy as well as the British Council. And honestly, I just really went there to read cartoons and kind of get away from everything. And as she mentioned, I did run into this book. It was right next to the Shakespeare, and people know my love for Shakespeare. And wrote down the letters, wrote down the names, and ended up writing to schools. And yes, I did choose Breck because it was going to give me the opportunity to live with families and learn firsthand about the American culture. My mom sold pretty much a lot of the things she owned just to get enough money to get me to New York. And the extra money that she had for me was about $300. So of course, I didn't know anybody in New York, but didn't know much about the American, how things work here. So I assumed if I got to New York, asked around, people would show me where the Ghanaians lived. So I flew to New York, and it took me probably around 4 hours to muster the courage to hail a cab. And so I get into the cab, and the cab goes, "Where do you want to go?" "Take me to the Bronx." And he said, "The Bronx?" I mean, this is early 90s. The Bronx wasn't exactly the safest place. And he kept saying, "Where in the Bronx?" He just, "Take me to the Bronx." So I get in there, and he turns on the meter. Mind you, I have $300 in my pocket. And the meter keeps going up. And of course, I don't know how far the Bronx was. So I was just convinced that I was going to lose all my money by the time I got to the Bronx. And we go through the toll booth, and the money jumps because they had to pay the toll. And I'm looking like, not only am I going to lose the money, this guy's trying to make extra money off of me. So I get to the Bronx, and I'm there again for several hours. It's getting dark. And asking people if they knew any Ghanaians, and none of them knew Ghanaians. Eventually, a cab driver comes by, and then another one comes by. The two cars were trying to pump some gas because he really dropped me off at a gas station. And they started speaking the language I understood because I grew up in an immigrant neighborhood, even though in Africa we're African immigrants to some degree. And so one of the languages was the language I grew up with. So I went to them, and luckily they took me home that night, called my host parents who were terrified that I'm stuck somewhere in the Bronx, and put me on Greyhound bus to Minneapolis. So that was the visit. I got to Minneapolis. I think Greyhound bus was in Uptown at the time. And yeah, the Target Center, near it. And there was a punk guy with a mohawk. And you know, my idea of someone with a mohawk and purple hair was from movies. So I was terrified because this guy's coming towards me. I'm like, okay, listen, I just got here. Like, I'm not, you know. And he comes over, seeing that I was having some trouble, and I kind of showed him the paper that had the number of my host parents on it, and he took a coin out of his pocket and used the payphone, which I'm not sure if you guys know about payphones, but they existed back then, and dialed the number for me. And I say that story just to illustrate the kind of kindness I started seeing soon after I got to Breck. And the kindness was just everywhere, from the students, from the faculty, from everybody. My host parents went above and beyond to make sure that I was comfortable. And I want to mention something with regards to that. When I went and wrote those letters to the schools, and I was talking in my neighborhood about, maybe I can get a scholarship to go abroad. And people really looked at me like I was crazy. It was so outside of the box for us. It was completely out of left field. And many questioned the audacity of someone like me from my background. My mom has never been to school, never stepped a foot in the classroom, neither has my dad. To imagine that somehow some school somewhere abroad will be willing to take a chance on that kid. And when you look at it from the other side, which is Breck's side, I wasn't, as she mentioned, the typical student that came here. There was a good pipeline of students who came from Scandinavia to play hockey, from Germany to play soccer, from Russia, but I didn't fit that mold. So they had to think outside the box as well to make this happen. And so when you have something in you that leads you somewhere, you have to stick with that voice, because I was given plenty of reasons not to have continued. And if I had been discouraged, my life would have turned out differently. So I showed up at Breck, trying to adjust. The adjustment was multi-layered. It was cultural, it was socioeconomic, it was linguistic. There was just so many layers to the adjustment that it wasn't that smooth of sailing. So you can imagine how terrified I was when I was in Dr. Miller's class one time. And I'm sitting there and he's asking questions and I wanted to answer it. And so I put my finger up like this, my hand up like this, and of course my middle finger kind of lazily stuck out. And everybody was snickering. Dr. Miller looks at me and chuckles a little bit and just continues like nothing happened. So I didn't understand it. I kept looking around me. Why are they chuckling? What's going on here? So afterwards, one of my host brothers, John George, who was sitting behind me at the time, goes, "Dude, you just gave him the finger." I was mortified. It's like, dude, you just got here and you're already giving your teachers the finger. In my country, that didn't really mean much. I was convinced that I was about to be deported. So every time a siren went off, I'm like, oh no, that's it, they're about to get me. So you can see how terrified I was when one day, at the end of class, I was about to walk out. Dr. Miller goes, "Muri, come here." I'm like, oh, that's it, that's definitely it. He goes over to his pet snake. I don't know if you guys ever saw it. It was a corn snake, yellow snake. He takes it out of the box and he says, "Let's go outside." I was convinced they're out there to get me. And so we get there and I see this flurry coming down. It was snow. There had been a few flurries before that, but that was actually the day it was really snowing. And so I put my hands out, stuck my tongue out, and he was holding his pet snake while I enjoyed the snow. Little did I know that it was going to be the storm of the century. So it kept snowing and snowing and snowing. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? And my host parents at the time, the Levitts, God bless them, will go out to help people. Somehow, Minnesotans thought it was completely appropriate to drive in that kind of weather. So they would get stuck in front of the house, and we'd go out and push them out, and my fingers would be like this. I'll come back in, as it's towing, somebody else will get stuck. And then we'll go again and do it. Then later that night, I think it was during Halloween, people started showing up dressed like dead people, asking for candy. And I was like, man, every time it snows like this, the people dress like dead people and hand out candies. It's a fascinating culture. But you can see from the story how frameworks can really shape how we interpret facts. And the world is really changing in a lot of ways. And I challenge you guys to step outside of your framework, because I drew completely the wrong conclusions because I had a particular framework. Of course, I knew that. We later found out that, Minnesotans were praying to the snow gods whenever it's, they don't dress like dead people and pray to the snow gods whenever there's a snow. And I knew you definitely would not get deported for mistakenly giving your teacher the finger. I mean, you may go to detention, but not deportation. But the experience has been great because for me, being here, I had to grow up, but also try to find a way to be a teenager. And perhaps that was probably the biggest challenge for me. My host parents were wonderful in the sense that they gave me that room to be my authentic self, while still dealing with the kind of angst that comes with being a teenager in a space that you're not familiar with. And I'm forever grateful for that. Today, my fiancé and I got here early because there have been some changes around. We're a bit confused. And one of the seniors, I think her name is Austin, walked up to us and asked, "How may I help you?" And I remember looking at her and smiling and saying, "Breck has never changed." That was what I experienced when I got here. When I got here, one of the first weeks, I had gotten lost trying to figure out how to get the bus to a soccer game. And the bus left without me, and I was just frantic, just trying to figure it out. And one of the students, who at that time was a year ahead of me, Vanessa Opperman, was driving in a wagon, and she stopped and came back. She came back, she got out, came back and asked me what I needed. I mean, I didn't even see her. She just literally, I saw the car moving, the car stopped, she got out and came over, and found out that I was having difficulty getting to the soccer game. And she changed her plans, got me into her car and took me all the way to Orem so I can participate. That's the kind of kindness I've always found here. That's why, for me, as far as this country is concerned, this will always be home. I will always be a Mustang. This country is changing in ways that sometimes it's a bit worrying. The America I found in 1991 is a bit different from what I see now. I spoke about authenticity earlier. Part of being authentic also is making room for other people to be authentic around you, because that's how you get ideas across and grow from them. And I'm hoping that you will see, you will take from here the need for you to make room and listen to each other, because it's ever so important right now, actually, because I feel like things have just drifted apart. Another thing I want to mention is that the world is getting smaller. That neighborhood I came from, I can tell you there are kids there who can take apart a cell phone and put it back together easily right now. It means that the people you're going to be competing with around the world are catching up. Therefore, as a matter of survival, it's extremely important that you start considering frameworks outside of your own and learning about them. Because if you don't, trust me, you will be left behind. Thank you very much for having me and taking the time. Everybody looks fantastic in their ties and stuff. So, and thank you so much.